Okay, let me ask you something. And I want you to actually answer in your head, not just nod out loud. What's the number? I mean, the number. The one where if that amount landed in your account every single month for the rest of your life, you could walk into work, hand in your notice, and never go back. Most people have literally never worked that out. They've got this vague feeling about it, a sort of like one day feeling, but they've never actually put a figure on it. And here's the thing that I've noticed after years of sitting across the table from people having this exact conversation with themselves. Not knowing is the bit that's kind of keeping them stuck, because you can't hit a target that you can't see. So today, that is our job. We are going to find your number, the real one. Just as a quick heads up before we dive in, there's a free app linked in the description below that does this whole calculation in about 30 seconds. It's the exact one that I use with my own clients. So it'd be really useful maybe if you downloaded it before you watch the video so we can sort of have it as you play along. So download it, follow along. It will get your actual number as we go. Grab it in the link in the description and yeah, play along. Right, let's crack on. Now, before we get into it, I need to clear just one thing up because I think it's something that almost everyone kind of gets wrong. And look, I'll be honest, early on in my career, it's something that I misunderstood as well. So when people talk about being able to stop working, what they're actually really chasing is passive income, right? And that word passive is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. Now, true passive income means zero input, right? No hours, no effort, no you. The money just turns up whether you get out of bed or not. Now, there are many ways that people will tell you. You only just have to spend 2 seconds on YouTube to see passive income, passive income, passive income. You'll see things like trading is a big one, or start a business, which is an absolute joke, invest in a buy-to-let property, or insert any number of passive income schemes here. But the reality is that we are talking today about income that is truly passive. And it's my opinion, and other people will differ from it, but it's my opinion that what we're going to talk about is really the only true passive income that exists. The genuinely passive version of income, the one that asks nothing of you, comes from having a pot of money invested in things like funds, in stocks, in bonds, in commodities, whatever you want to call it, but invested in a portfolio that just does the hard work for you. It will either pay you an income through interest on dividends that it kind of naturally throws off, or you can use it to draw down capital a bit at a time. That is it. All other things, in my experience and my view, seeing it firsthand with clients and other people that I've worked with, nothing is really as passive as that. The only thing that's passive is an investment portfolio that's just working and cracking on, okay? And the key thing here is the word cracking on and creating an income for the rest of your life. That is the whole game. Getting an income that can pay you for the rest of your whole life. Look, anyone can have an X amount in a pot and just spend that down over 10 years. The real trick is making that pot of money last for as long as you do. It's pretty much why I have a job, essentially, I think. So the question is, how do you know how much you can pull safely each year without the well running dry? Well, this is where something that I'm probably sure you've seen before, but it's a brilliantly simple, effective, kind of blunt tool comes in. It's called the 4% rule. Here's what it means. If you withdraw roughly 4% of an invested pot each year, the odds are pretty strong that you'll kind of never run out of money, right? The pot will keep growing a little bit in the background, and you keep taking your slice off of the top. The maths just about holds for decades. Now, I can already hear the finance nerds typing, right? It's not exactly 4%, it should be 3.5 or da-da-da-da-da. The studies say this. Look, okay, I get you, right? Fair enough. We could all argue as long as the day is long, essentially, the exact figure. And it changes day to day, in market to market, and all that sort of stuff. Some years, it's obviously a little bit more. Some years, it's a little bit less than that makes that figure look right or not. But this 4% figure is something that's just a blunt tool that works most of the time. And it's a rough rule that you can actually use, and a rough tool beats a perfect one that you just never get round to. So 4% a year, whatever you've got invested, if you're taking about 4% a year from it, that's your safe slice, okay? And here's the beautiful part. Once you know the slice, you can work backwards for the whole thing, because if 4% is what you can safely take in terms of a sustainable income for the rest of your life on a passive basis, then your pot, the amount of money that you have in order to achieve that, only needs to be big enough that 4% of it equals the income that you want to live off of. So there's an even quicker way of doing all of this, and it's the one bit that I want you to remember if you forget everything else that I say in this video. Take the income that you want per year, multiply it by 25, and that is your number. That is it. Whatever income you feel like you need, times by 25. So let's make this real. So let's say you decide that you need £40,000 a year to live off to live the life that you want, right? So mortgage gone, couple of proper holidays a year, not counting every single coffee, right? 40 grand times by 25 comes out at £1 million. Now, £1 million for £40,000 a year. Just sit with that a second, because I think it catches a lot of people kind of massively off guard the first time that they see it. And look, that £40,000, I just plucked it out of the air, right? Yours might be completely different, and I'm sure will be. This is the part that you genuinely can't outsource to me or anyone else. You have got to sit down and ask yourself this question. What does the life that I'm aiming for actually cost? Like, what is it that I want my life to look like? And therefore, what income do I actually need to meet that? What would make me happy to basically never work again? £1 grand a month of spending money on top of bills, maybe 2, maybe more, who knows? And honestly, doing that exercise is a stranger sort of experience that most people expect. They sit down, brace for like a boring sum, and end up properly thinking, maybe for the first time, about what they actually want the back half of their life to look like. Okay, so this is basically the be all and end all. So it's worth doing slowly and right. If you want a little bit of a sense check, here's a really handy benchmark from the Pensions and Lifetime Savings Association. That's the body that sort of represents the UK pension schemes, essentially. So that you know that these numbers are quite accurate, because you know what they're talking. They know what they're talking about, right? So they publish what different retirement lifestyles actually cost. So the latest figure puts a comfortable retirement for a single person at about £43,900 a year. So that's things like, 2 weeks in Europe on holiday, a few UK breaks, a few decent fun things in between. For a couple, it's about £60,600. A moderate lifestyle is obviously closer to £31,700 for a single person. Now, use those as like a starting point, right? It's not a gospel. When we have this conversation with clients, it's one of the first things we talk about is, okay, if you've got absolutely zero idea kind of what you want in terms of income or what that might look like, start off here, understand the descriptions of moderate or comfortable or whatever it might well be, and try to tailor it from there. Look, this is just a starting point. The number that matters is yours, and that's unique to you. It's not the same for everyone else. And one more really important thing while we're on this particular topic, and it's one that I promise it's useful rather than scary if you look at it in the right way, okay? The £40,000 that you would need today, if that's the figure that you want to pick, is not £40,000 that you'll need in 20 years' time. What do we see every single day in the news, right? Prices creep up over time. The cost of living is creeping up and up and up. And it's been exponential over the last couple of years. That is inflation, right? Just the slow, steady rise in the cost of everything just existing. So if your retirement and all of these numbers are still some way off, right? If it's still a fair way off for you, then 40K in today's money might need to look more like 55 or 60,000 by the time that you actually get there. Same lifestyle. So whatever you figured out, okay, if this happened to me today, it's going to be 40K, whatever, pick a figure. If you want to achieve that, not today, but in 20 years' time, try to figure out what the inflation-proof figure you might actually need might well be by that point. So it's a bit convoluted, but that really gives you that protection. Okay, so you've got to answer 2 questions next, okay? And the order they come in really, really, really matters. So how much income do you want? We've already just covered that, right? And when do you want it? That second question obviously impacts the inflation side of things, but that second question quietly decides everything about where you actually put your money to start saving. Here's why. A pension, and if you've watched any of my other videos, I'm sure you'll kind of see and pick this up. A pension is, in my view, the single most powerful tool that most of us have for turning the money we earn into the kind of capital that will pay us later on. Okay, I think it's the best weapon we've got. The tax perks on it are genuinely impossible to beat. But, and here's the catch, you cannot get your hands on a pension until you're 55, and that's rising to 57 in 2028. So for most of the people watching this, you can't touch it until you're 57. So if your plan is to say stop at 45, well, there's not much point in stuffing everything you've got into a pot that you legally can't touch for a decade, right? That's where something like an ISA, or particularly a stocks and shares ISA, earns its place. It's a pot, of course, that you can dip into at any age and is completely tax-free when you take money out. And before you ask, no, it's not always just one or the other, right? You don't have to choose between one or the other. Most people, in my experience, end up with kind of a bit in both, obviously. Maybe a few years of ISA money to bridge that gap, that early gap, and then when the pension kicks in behind it, it covers it. But the when has to come first, because when you know, hey, I need X amount of money by Y time, you know the 2 equations, and it means you're saving your money in the right pot for the right purpose for your objectives. Decide the date, then choose the pot, or to be honest, it chooses itself. Right. Now for the part that tends to stop people dead, to be honest with you. A lot of people carry around this quiet assumption that I've noticed around that £500,000 is like this goal, this finish line, right? If I have £500,000, I'll be sorted. I could just pack it all in. And I get it, right? It feels like a massive number, £500,000. It feels like it should be enough. Keyword feels. And I don't really want this to land as a lecture, right? Because it isn't your fault, and it's not the people that say it's fault. Nobody's ever actually shown most people the maths that we're going through now, but let's run it together. £500,000, £500,000 at 4%, using the 4% rule, pays you £20,000 a year, 20 grand. That is not a comfortable retirement that we were just talking about. That is barely scraping past the minimum one for most people. £500,000 sounds like the destination, right? But for a lot of people, it turns out to be roughly halfway through. And here's where it gets a bit more uncomfortable. So just brace yourself for a second, right? The average pension pot in the UK, a typical one sitting sort of in the middle of the band, is around £32,700. Even for people that are right at the doorstep of retirement, aged like 65 to 74, it only climbs to about 145,900. Now, set that against the number that for a comfortable life often needs to be closer to basically £1 million in your pension. And you start to see the actual size of the gap that we're dealing with. A lot of people are £500,000 short and some on what they need. Now, if you've just run that sum in your head or you've used the app and you felt your stomach drop a little bit, good. And I mean that, not because I want you to be panicking or have anxiety about it, because that feeling right now, while you've still got like runway in front of you, is worth more than any reassurance I could possibly hand you, let me tell you. Because here's the thing about all of this, about this gap, right? The number isn't fixed, and like neither are you. The moment you've got your real target nailed down, right? Your income needs times by 25, at what age, you stop like just randomly guessing and randomly accumulating your money, and you start steering, right? You start seeing exactly how much you need to be putting away each month. You can see exactly how much sooner you'd cross the line if you just nudge those contributions up slightly. And this is exactly what that free app that I mentioned previously is built for. You just pop in your date of birth, you pop in what you've already got tucked away in things like a pension or in investments, the income that you want, and of course the date that you want it by, and it will do the rest, right? It just tells you in plain numbers how much you need to be contributing each month to actually hit the target. That is it. No jargon, no spreadsheets, no homework. It's not a wonderfully sharp tool, but it does the job. It turns the vague sort of one day feeling into a real figure that you can actually act on. It's free, it's linked in the description. And honestly, if you do one thing off the back of this video, just make it that. But the target isn't quite the full picture on its own, okay? Because there are two things that are quietly moving that target. And the reality is that they pull in different directions. The first is the state pension, okay? This one works in your favor, obviously. Here's what people forget. You don't have to build your entire income out of your own pot, because once you hit that state pension age, the government starts paying you too. So the full new state pension right now is worth around £12,500 a year, roughly, right? So let's say, for example, your target was £40,000. Your own investments don't actually need to cover that full 40. Once the state pension lands, they only need to cover the gap, which in this case, of course, is about £27,500. And £27,500 times by 25 comes out to about £688,000. So not that £500,000, right? Same lifestyle, but because you've got that income coming in from the state pension just knocked off the best part of £300,000 of the pot that you have to build for yourself. So that's the difference between a target that feels impossible and one that's actually within reach, right? By understanding what income sources you might well have at various stages throughout your life and how that correlates and translates to the income that you feel like you need to never have to work again, this will start shaping this up nicely. Look, this is probably a little piece of that pie that you'd forgotten back in the day. Now, two honest caveats, okay? Because I am not here to sell you a fairy tale. One, you can't claim the state pension until state pension age, obviously, right? Which is already heading towards 67 and will almost certainly be higher by the time that the younger people watching this get there. So if you're planning to stop at 50, you've got a few good years of bridging from your own funds before it ever shows up. Okay, so that's the first thing. Number two, You only get the full amount if you've built up enough qualifying years of national insurance. That's basically the record of contributions that you make through work. So it's well worth checking your own forecast rather than just assuming that you'll get a state pension. You can do this you can do it completely for free on the government's website in like 2 minutes. It's called a BR19. Just give it a Google and you will find it easily. Okay. Now, for most people, the state pension is a real chunk of the answer. Okay. And leaving it out from your calculation and your sums means that you'll probably frighten yourself with a number that's far bigger than it actually needs to be if your plans are not focusing around retiring early, but actually just factoring in normal life. So that's good news, right? Now, the bit that pulls the other way, okay? Tax. You probably are already ahead of me before I get there. So here's the catch with the income times 25 rule. The income it gives you is money coming like in, or the gross amount that you are withdrawing. It's not necessarily the money that you actually get to spend. The difference between those 2 points is tax. And where you've built your pot sort of decides massively how hard that gap exists. So obviously money that you take out of an ISA is completely tax-free, okay? Every single penny you withdraw is yours to keep and spend. So in that case, if you've got everything in your ISA, obviously the income times by 25 rule works perfectly because you don't have to take into account the tax drag. A pension, on the other hand, works differently. Now, with a pension, you can take 25% of it, or roughly a quarter, or not roughly, exactly a quarter, as a tax-free lump sum. It's called a pension commencement lump sum, PCLS. But the rest, the remaining 75%, is basically treated exactly the same as income. Obviously without the national insurance bit, but it's taxed as income. So you've got 25% tax-free cash, 75% remaining is taxable as income, which, if you think about that, means that once you go past your tax-free allowance, the 12,500-ish that you get tax-free that you can earn, you will be paying income tax on it like you do now, okay? And that allowance is also where things get a bit sneaky, okay? This is a big thing in the news at the moment. At the moment, you can receive around £12,570 a year before you pay any income tax at all. But the state pension that we were just talking about, that's going to be already around £12,500. So it's quietly swallowing almost the entire allowance on its own, which means that for a lot of people, very nearly every pound that they pull out of their pension on top of the state pension will be taxed. So we've got to think about that really, really carefully. So look, if you want £40,000 a year to actually land in your bank account for you can spend, you can't simply build a pot that pays £40,000 because, of course, the tax man takes his cut before you even see it. To genuinely spend 40 grand, you might need to be withdrawing closer to like 45 or even 50, right? Depending on how your money's split between your pension and your ISA. The number you want to spend and the number that you need to generate it, they are not the same number. And tax is the gap between the two. So you've got to be really careful and mindful as to if you're thinking, I want 40 grand a year, but I'm doing most of that through a pension, you might want to increase that to say 45 or 50 just to give you a little bit of headroom. In fact, tax is such a big impact on building wealth that I actually covered it in this video here. It's one about the 5 silent traps bleeding high earners dry. So give it a watch and you can finally start seeing your income translate into real wealth once and for all. So give it a click and I will see you there.